Hello, Robert. How's it going?
Not too bad, Hugo. How are you today?
I'm fine too. Thank you. Glad to have you back. Glad to talk to you again once again after I think a few months now.
Yeah, it's sort of been longer than we expected, but that's just the way of things these days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, life is happening still, and so we. It's always a bit more complicated to find time to talk about old stuff. So yeah,
Wow.
but
Fortunately, this is one I think we both have a fair bit of experience with.
yes, absolutely. I think you have more experience than I do, but it's a very interesting topic in a very interesting period in the history of video games. So, well, first of all, people who are listening, welcome once again to SVGA, your retro gaming PC podcast. PC retro gaming podcast. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty, I think. And so yeah, welcome once again to the show. What are we talking about this week, Robert?
We are talking about Duke Nukem 3D, a childhood favorite, which looking back was maybe not something I should have been playing as a child.
uh, it's it's very interesting to me that the games we used to play when we were young. I mean, probably you more than me, but I do remember going to my friend's place on Saturday mornings and playing Doom, which is, I mean, it's not for a teenage boy.
No.
It's not for a child. It's not a game for a child. There's a lot of violence, obviously, and I think it's the same for Duke Nukem 3D. I did not play Duke Nukem 3D while I was young. I saw footage. I saw demo reels in stores, and obviously I knew about the game, but I have only started playing it last year, I think.
Okay.
And so I think in that case you are the expert on the subject. But so yeah, we did play some pretty violent games when we were young, and it's. I mean, you are now the father of a very young man. Obviously, he's not old enough to play video games yet. But would you let him play Duke Nukem and Doom before he was a teenager?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I like to think I'd be a cool dad. That's a good question. I don't know. I would certainly, if he did, much like I did, he would play with the parental controls on, which like remove the nudity.
Yeah. Yeah, because there is nudity in Duke Nukem 3D. I think it was one of the most, don't want to say controversial at the time, but probably, yes, probably controversial aspect of the game at the time, which was because we were used, well, people back then were used to violence in video games. You shoot a monster, it explodes. I mean, you play Mario, jump on Goombas and they flatten out. And I do remember, well, I wasn't there at the time, but I do remember that there was a scandal at the time when there was a game on the Atari about, I don't remember which slasher movie it was, but you could play as the killer and kill people with a chainsaw. And it was basically 3 pixels and this electronic scream when you hit someone. And it was scandalous at the time. And so I think the way we see these things obviously change over time, but maybe we are on a going back maybe to some kind of don't want to say censorship, but maybe there was an overdose at some point, overdose of violence, of nudity, of sex on TV and in movies. So maybe we're slightly going back.
I feel like, yeah, I think part of it was like the 90s pushing boundaries, like being extreme, that sort of thing kind of contributed a lot to it. Because if you looked at the previous 2 Duke Nukems, which I had also played, they were side scrollers.
Yeah.
They were more really classic, which kind of made 3D quite the sort of leap. But there wasn't really any of that. It was, fighting a supervillain with against aliens, robots, sort of bad guys, and then Duke Nukem 3D took it to a much different place. Well, maybe not much different, but sort of the next extreme level, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. With the uppercase X, obviously,
Oh, of course.
and maybe a tree somewhere in there, or anyway. But yeah, because we've talked about Doom, I think 2 years back now, and obviously Doom was, I said it before, violent with satanic imagery. It was the music was based on heavy metal. It was made by a bunch of dudes in their 20s who were listening to heavy metal at the time, and there's this whole bunch of links between Apogee Interactive, which became 3D Realms, and id Software, and it was sort of a microcosm maybe at the time, and so yeah, we went from Duke Nukem 1 and 2, which I've played I think on the sound card driver CD. It was a bunch of shit. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but we had when my dad won our first family computer. On the CD, which had the drivers for the sound card, if you went into DOS and you typed "fun" on the directory of the CD, you went into this menu of shareware games, which had 99 games, well, games in quotation marks here, and you could play a bunch of demos or shareware stuff. And there was Duke Nukem, I think 1 and 2, but it never went farther than that. And eventually, I went to I think my first person shooter, or 3D shooter, was Dark Forces,
right?
Which we talked about last time we talked together on the show about the remaster. And then I moved, I think, to Outlaws, which is another game from LucasArts at that time.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so Duke Nukem, like I said, I never had the opportunity to play it. It was more of an adult game in my head, as was Doom at the time, I think. But yeah, when you first played Duke Nukem 3D, what was your first impression?
So I think I played the shareware. I must have first, and I don't know. I think it was really exciting in a way that, because when you play it, the 3D aspect of it was a lot further ahead than say Doom was.
Yeah.
Like in the second level, I think you have like a building that falls down. Like there are the world seemed more, like the world.
Yeah.
Even if, looking back, still very, very small. The enemies are still all sprites and so on. So they're just flat characters that sort of move.
Yeah.
But there was something really, I don't know, it really grabbed hold of me, in part because I had played the first two Duke Nukem, so I was like, I mean, as much as Duke is a character. But there was something also like strangely interactive about the world. Like you could sort of, the balls on the pool table, you could shoot them and they would bounce off each other. And being a young boy, like, ooh, like this scary violence and, nudity that's hidden from you and so on. There was a certain aspect of like, that's interesting. And eventually I did get the full game, and it came in, it was called the Atomic Pack.
Yeah. The Atomic Edition, I think.
Yes, the Atomic Edition, and that had like 4 or 5 CDs, I think. It had the full game. It added in another episode. There were expansions like Duke on the Beach. There was a beach one, and Duke It Out in DC, where you went through Washington, DC to save Bill Clinton from the aliens that have abducted him. That one was actually pretty fun because you got to go through like the Smithsonian Museum and the White House and like all those sorts of things, which was, it was interesting. But it was one that I remember also spending a lot of time reading the manuals. Not that there was a lot of information in them, but like the Atomic Edition had like 3 or 4 manuals for these different games and expansions. And I think it eventually would become the first game I also played multiplayer. Oh,
I see. Yeah. And I mean, I can understand why you would, because it's, okay, it's not possible to talk about Duke Nukem without talking about Doom, obviously, because there wouldn't be any Duke Nukem without Doom. It came out about 3 years earlier, and you've talked about graphic improvements. It feels much more real in Duke Nukem, even without the locations. But obviously the locations play a great part in this. But just seeing how much more fluid it seems to be in Duke Nukem, you start on a rooftop. There's your ship crashing down. I think it's basically the direct sequel to the end of Duke Nukem 2, when you go back to Earth and aliens shoot down your ride, and they're gonna pay. That's all the intro you need. And not only is it more fluid with reloading animations, which you didn't have in Doom, everything seems to be moving. You can shoot. The first thing you can do, and the game wants you to, is shoot some gas canisters to make something explode, and then you can jump down on the street level and so on. You can jump around, which you couldn't do in Doom. There was some trickery involved in Doom to make you think you were able to jump, but it wasn't really quite there yet. The locations. It's one thing to be in one industrial base or one military base, one after another, or go into hell and see these levels which do not resemble anything besides some blocks and some corridors and so on. But you've talked about the expansion in DC. Even today, if you told me, oh, there's a shooter coming out and you can play in the subway station in Montreal. There was, I think at the time, I believe there was someone made a map in Counter-Strike, which was the Berry-UQAM subway station in Montreal. And the transport authority, I think, told the guy, just remove it. Because you're gonna be in trouble, because it gave possibly the impression that there could be some terrorist attack in the subway station. But I think it's always more cool to be able to play a game in a place you already know, or in a place you have heard about, instead of generic, I guess, a generic industrial place or generic military base and so on.
No, I think that's right. I think that's one of the things that, even putting aside the Washington D.C. expansion, there's something that seems more. I mean, it's a recognizable world.
Yeah.
In like, it's fantastical. There's aliens capturing women, and there's pigs with shotguns dressed in LAPD outfit. Like it's
which is very subtle. You have to admit. A cop as a pig is a very subtle imagery here.
We'll let that one speak for itself. But I think because of that, sort of the world seemed, more plausible. It didn't seem as much like a level. I mean, you go through now and it's clearly these are levels, and we're not talking about some big open world or anything, but there is, it had moved things far enough along that you can sort of, it's a really important transitional game, I guess is what I'm trying to say, from like Doom to, I think, Half-Life. It sort of sits in the middle of those two, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe one more thing, it is very, you look at it today and it's logical that they had this step. And obviously, in Half-Life, which is something that sits apart of the rest, but because you are a silent protagonist and so on. But the fact that you can talk in Duke Nukem 3D, the fact that in Doom you're just Doom guy, or John Doom, as some people like to call him. He has no name because he's a nobody. He's some kind of mythical figure. In Duke Nukem, you are, obviously, someone using a lot too much steroids to be able to function properly, but you are Duke Nukem. You are someone. You are a strong and masculine man, and you talk. You have one-liners. You have it's the epitome of the mid-90s. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's Sylvester Stallone. It's the guy with the huge biceps shooting a machine gun. And so it's really sets it apart from, I think, a lot of other games where you don't talk, you don't know what you look like. In Duke Nukem, there's a bunch in the first level, there's a bunch of mirrors in the toilet somewhere, and you can see yourself, which strangely other games don't seem to be able to do, or they just cut it out. But it's all these little things that makes it a game where you're much more invested personally than generic shooter number 53765
So I'm curious, as someone who doesn't have the sort of nostalgia for it, how do you find the game? Like, what did you take away from it?
I mean, I do appreciate the cool factor. It's, I think, much more. I do enjoy Doom a lot, but I think when you think about boomer shooters right now, when you think about all these snarky characters and people trying to bring back this kind of coolness in quotation marks once again, I go to Duke Nukem in my head. It's not. Maybe it's Doom, but Doom is Doom. Doom is still around. Doom has Doom 2016, Doom Eternal. I do have my problems with that kind of stuff but that's maybe another topic for another day. But I do have my problems with this idea that you always have to be moving, shooting, and always on the brink of death, and you have to. I want to be powerful. I want to be a tough guy with a bunch of guns and a bunch of ammo, and I want to mow down enemies. And don't tell this to my my shrink. But I want to feel. I want to feel like I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, and all not in Predator, in Commando. I think that's the important distinction to have here. And so playing this right now, after playing a bunch of other games, after playing Half-Life, after playing Doom, I really see the appeal. I find it very cool, but I also think that Duke Nukem 3D was the peak of something, and it died right after that. There was no coming back. We won't talk about Duke Nukem Forever, but
I think that's actually something we should talk about is Duke Nukem Forever.
we can talk about
it. I remember I bought that game when that came out, and I knew going in that like this was not a good video game. Yeah. But I was just like, I had waited for this one for a long time, so long that I'd actually stopped consciously waiting for it. But then it was like, oh, this thing exists.
Yeah,
and genuinely one of the worst things I've ever played. You start off on like a football field and you got one of the best weapons from the previous game and you're destroying some giant alien. And the only other thing I remember was like ended up having to drive a radio controlled car for some reason. I might have been shrunk down. It might have just been big. I don't know. And I got stuck. Like the car physically got stuck in the game and I just dropped it. And it's an interesting game in the sense that people wanted a Duke Nukem sequel so bad, and they couldn't do it. And when they finally did it, it had been in just development hell for so long that it was truly awful.
Yeah.
But I think you're right in pointing out that like Duke Nukem 3D was sort of like the most that sort of thing could ever be, and whatever made that any good or interesting game was just gone after that.
And I think because if you look at, I want to say two things. The first one is, do you remember the promotional video for Duke Nukem Forever back in the day? I think in 2001, something like that. It looked cool. It looked really cool with good 3D graphics. It was on the heels of Half-Life, and it it looked nice. There was some nice particle effects. I remember an enemy having a riot shield. I think a policeman having a riot shield.
This is
and
familiar.
You were shooting the riot shield, and it shattered, or there was some fissures on it. And at the time, it looked really cool. But it's, I think a game will fit into a specific period of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a Call of Duty today. I know they're still pumping those out and they're still selling millions of them, but Call of Duty, when they launched the first one about the Second World War, it was incredible. It was a cinematic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then they switched to Modern Warfare, and it was really cool. It was another cinematic experience with links to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. But they don't think they were ever able to replicate that success today. And I think that's why they keep trying to remaster games and to modernize stuff. And so with Duke Nukem, I think at the time it was a few years after Doom, as I said, it was a craze for first-person shooters. Mm-hmm. Computers were getting better. There were some better graphics cards. Processors were faster. And at the time, it was extraordinary how you could go from... I think we've talked about Biomenace on the show. Was it the second or third game we talked about? Something like that. And it came out in 1993. And a few months later, Doom was out. And so to be able to go from 2D to 3D in 6 months, crazy. Today, today there's more polygons. Oh, the fish move away when you we don't care. So, and so... going back to Duke Nukem, I think I'm rambling on maybe a bit, but you have to be in the right period of time. Mm-hmm. You have to be in the right era. And I think this is also why there hasn't been Half-Life 3 and why we don't. And so having this game, which is crazy fun, but to be... to feel more like a member of Generation Z instead of a millennial. The vibes are not good today. But so anyway, and I want to end this very long parenthesis by saying that, yes, today there is a niche for boomer shooters. There's a niche for people wanting to play these kind of games. I really doubt that there's the same intensity of the same volume of sales, first of all, and mm-hmm. the same intensity around this genre that there was now 30 years ago. Will we ever go back to this? I doubt it. And so it's really an artifact, a time artifact, the mid-90s, and it died.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that no one has tried to pick it back up again, like maybe they think just it's cursed or whatever. Yeah. But I mean, we've seen re-releases of Duke Nukem 3D, but you don't see someone trying to like, let's do a Duke Nukem 5. Because I don't think there's a market for that. I mean, think about how many first-person shooter single-player games are out there.
Yeah. Besides the boomer shooter genre, there's
right.
Not many. I mean, usually Call of Duty, they do a small campaign, 5 or 6 hours, and the fun is in the multiplayer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of the way the whole genre has moved, is it's a multiplayer genre.
Yeah.
Which, I go in and out of that. I'm currently not that interested in it, but there is some charm to it.
Yeah.
But the idea of like a character-driven first-person shooter, single-player campaign seems just like something that doesn't exist anymore. And especially one of this sort of like, look how cool I am, kids, kind of like...
I mean, he's an asshole. Duke Nukem is an asshole. I
yes.
mean, he's a womanizer. We've talked about the nudity. You go into, I think, very first level.
Mm-hmm.
There's the point where it's a strip club and you throw money at the girls and they show you their breasts. And I mean, it's cool when you are 15 in 1996. It's, oh my god, this is spy, this is raunchy. I mean, and today it's just, why are you doing this? It's
Yeah, that sort of stuff really doesn't hold up in a way. And I think that is sort of one of the reasons I think that this game wouldn't work now, is there's not that appetite for like being edgy in that way. I mean, there isn't sort of some part of the political spectrum, but I don't think in terms of it being sort of interesting or that fun, it's more of just like a haha, screw you, this makes you uncomfortable, but it's not actually enjoyable. Like it doesn't, no one's, it's not the sort of thrill anyone really goes looking for anymore. No. Like video games have sort of moved past the era of being a strange and edgy thing for, a specific type of person. It's now like there's video games for everybody.
Yeah.
And so this sort of tone just, it doesn't play to anything anymore.
But still, do you still enjoy Duke Nukem 3D even today?
It's fun. Like I don't think I finished the first campaign or the first episode or whatever, but it was like, oh yeah, this is a well-built shooter. Like the gunplay is good, the enemies are challenging, but not like too much. The world is interesting, like with its flaws. It's also like you can blow up certain walls, and it takes the key card thing to interesting places. Like you need to use a key card to, demolish a building. And there's a level where you go inside a submarine in a dry dock. Like it does interesting things, and it's kind of fun. It's just, I'm not in the mid 90s anymore either. So like there's only like, okay, like this is fun, but I play different things now.
Yeah.
But I do still think it's a well-made video game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it still suffers from design tropes of the time, notably key hunting. I hate key hunting in games, and especially when it's somewhere that, for the developers, it's obvious. I think there's a place in the first campaign where you have to go through a poster in the level.
Oh yeah.
And because in the first level you can do that, you go through a poster. It's a secret area. Oh, that's cool. If you have ever seen someone playing it, I think one of the YouTubers I follow called LGR, which he tests his old computers by playing Duke Nukem, and that's nice. I mean, he does the first level for a little bit. He goes through that poster. He gets the rocket launcher. But there's another level where I was looking where to go, and I have to look at a walkthrough that says, "Oh, it's obvious. You have to go through the poster." And how is it obvious? I don't remember. I don't necessarily link that poster to the one in the first level, and I understand why they did that, but maybe I'm old, maybe I'm dumb. Maybe with the years going by, my brain is working less and less. But it's something, I don't know. It's stuff of that era that was good at the time, but today it's like, where am I going? What am I doing? What's the next? And I don't necessarily want to be. I don't want someone to take my hand as, I'm going to show you, just sit down and it's on a rail and you don't have to do anything. But I want something in the middle between corridor shooter and you have to find 28 keys and you have to remember the passcode. And it's like, God damn it. I mean,
yeah. No, there are certain elements of it that are do get dated. And I think that's a good point, that there are certain tropes that have been left behind for a good reason.
Yeah, but I think that one of the best features of Duke Nukem, besides the more fluid gameplay, besides the realistic aspect of the levels, is the music. Because if you think about Duke Nukem, I mean, when I do, it's Duke Nukem, the theme starts playing in my head. And just before we started recording, I sent you a link, someone doing a cover of the theme song with a more metal and synthesized sort of approach. And it still slaps. It's 30 years later, it's still very good music.
Yeah, and there's I don't know how often you watch Habs games, but my wife does, and she watches them on RDS, and there's a certain song they use for when they're going through scores around the league or whatever.
Okay.
And it is very similar to the Duke Nukem theme. And every time I hear it, I kind of look up and like, it's a really bizarre feeling, but you're right. There is something particular about the music that I think is, it really suited the game, and it still slaps.
When you played the game for the podcast, did you use some kind of port? Did you use the vanilla version? What did you go with?
I went with I think I actually used the Zoom release is the one I have, which it had a bunch of the other expansions, which I didn't go back and play, but it runs quite well, I find.
Yeah, I think I used the Zoom version too, but I went with the eDuke port or something. You need to have the base version of the game, but it enhances a bunch of stuff, the UI and so on. It's not as changed as it can be with, for example, Brutal Doom, where there's new weapons and blood everywhere and gore and guts. But now it's much more streamlined as an experience. It's much more, for example, you get mouse look by default. It's much more easier to walk. It was still a game that you could use the arrow keys to look around, and you could press control to shoot, and it was less present than in Doom, for example, but still you could play only with your keyboard, which today is an heresy, of course, but at the time it was a way to play the game. So just some quality of life stuff, basically. And that's, I think, one of the fun things about Doom, obviously, but also Duke Nukem 3D, is that there's so much mod support, so much custom maps, and it's still thriving. I mean, 30 years later.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that speaks to the fact that while the game may have been left behind as sort of like a model of things to do, it still has an audience out there that keeps it vibrant.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you recommend Duke Nukem 3D today?
I still would. Yeah, I still enjoyed my time in it. I didn't need to spend 30 hours with the game or anything, but it's an enjoyable one. Yeah,
absolutely. I would recommend it too. I think, and there's a bunch, and we won't get into the details because I don't even want to try to start to understand how everything about the rights and so on. It was bought by Bethesda, I think, at one point. There's a question of versions, of packs, of whatever. And so I think if you want the full experience, I believe it's, as we said, on Zoom platform.
Mm-hmm.
They have the Atomic Edition. There was a bunch of re-releases, new editions, remasters, but not technically a remaster, but not a remake at least. And so, that's another question I would like to ask you, because we had an interview with someone from Ziggurat Interactive a few weeks back now about Killing Time, which came out about the same time as Duke Nukem 3D. But would you like a studio like Night Dive to remake the game or remaster it?
That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Okay.
I think that would be one that I think I would get for nostalgic reasons. And the same reason I bought Duke Nukem Forever. Yeah. Like, I enjoyed that. Well, I didn't enjoy it, but, I felt it necessary to get it. And I would probably buy it, but I don't know how much of it I would play. because like I said, like I got a good taste of it. I enjoyed my time, and it's not one I go back to sort of like when I got a couple free hours or anything.
Yeah. And I have to say, I don't know either, because I was thinking about, well, we've talked about the Dark Forces remaster a few weeks back also, and it was fun to play once again, but it was not the kind of game I will necessarily go back to. And even if you do a remaster or a remake, maybe not a remake, but if you do remaster, well, you still stuck with the same engine limitations, maybe, or the same vibe. You won't change what Duke Nukem is about. And I mean, it can be cool and tough, but it's a satire. And if he won't tell you, oh, kids, you have to drink kombucha or recycle, or remember to vote Democrat, kids, or don't drive a big SUV. It won't happen. So
yeah, I think the world it was commenting on and satirizing just kind of it doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah.
So it's Arnold Schwarzenegger has since become like governor and tired, and like he's still kind of himself, but like it doesn't. I don't think it has that same, like, not that it was a searing social commentary or anything, but I just don't know what it has to say about this moment.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I do, as interesting as it would be, and as much as I would almost certainly buy it, like, it's not something. I think in some ways the failure of Duke Nukem Forever was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we should leave this thing where it is.
Yeah, we should let it die. It's dead. It's vaporware. But I mean, I understand why they finished it in quotation marks, but
very generous. But
yeah, that's why I'm quoting you. I'm doing gestures right now. But yeah, I think it's just to say that, oh, we did it. It's done. It's over. We can move on. You did have your time when you could play with your own feces, and that's all that we wanted. All right, right, Robert?
I had, until you reminded me about that one the other day when we were texting, I had forgotten that part existed.
That's quite all right.
I would have preferred if it had stayed forgotten, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. But and so, yeah, doing a remaster or remake, it's and I know it's a whole can of worms with the rights and so on. If you have to go in deep into the code, I'm guessing maybe some developers died since 1996. I don't know. There's a bunch still around, of course, but they're getting older. Maybe they're just pushing 60. I think they can still be around, be active, I guess. But still, it's, do they want to? Because they redid System Shock recently, which got, I think, some great reviews.
Yeah,
and they just put out a remaster of The Thing, a game from 2002 didn't even know existed, but it looks like a good game. So I think there's an appetite for this kind of stuff, but it's like you said before, it's a cursed franchise.
Yeah. So, and I think in the way that System Shock is an interesting game to revisit, because this kind of shooter doesn't really exist except in the sort of boomer shooter genre, I don't know that it's something that there's really, interested, which is maybe too bad, but maybe for the best. Like, maybe we have what we have, and we should just appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can still buy it. I mean, it's still, I'm just checking really quickly on my phone to see the price of this Duke Nukem edition on Zoom. Just give me, well, yeah, it's there. So it's $5.99. It's $6, I think $6 maybe, at worst $10, 10 Canadian dollars for the Atomic Edition. It's very, very much playable on Windows 11, and I'm guessing maybe Mac OS. I haven't tried it, but on Mac, but still, I think it's very much kept up to date.
Yeah, for that
Because
price, it's worth it.
yeah, it's $10. So it's like a coffee or something right now. It's
Maybe a small.
maybe a small coffee. Yeah. So yeah, that's Duke Nukem 3D. Well, Robert, thank you very much for your time today, talking with me about this. Is it a gem from the past? Is it a?
I would say so.
It's a classic. I think it's a classic. Yeah.
It's a classic, as corny as it can be in retrospect. In some ways, it's still a classic.
Yeah, and it's gonna be the last time we talk before 2025. So if you have maybe a few more minutes, I'd just like to ask a question about more modern games. Is there something you're playing right now? I know you're a busy man, but is there something your go-to game right now? Is there any title that comes into your mind?
So I've been playing Star Wars Outlaws, of all things, which I am enjoying. It released on Steam a few weeks ago, I think. I waited for that because I'd heard there was sort of a big overhaul coming to the game, and I figured I'd wait. And I'm enjoying it. I don't know if it's a great game.
I've tried it when it was on the Ubisoft launcher, which we won't call it by his name. It's like the Dark Lord of Mordor. If we don't speak that language, and I was bored out of my mind. It was just the first mission. I mean, I won't go into the details because it's a rant, but it's Star Wars. Give me spaceships. Give me shootouts. Give me adventure. Not you have to rob a place and you have to be stealthy, but not too stealthy. And it's all the same old tired mechanics from all those other Ubisoft games, and I was bored. I was so bored.
See, I'm fortunate because I haven't played any of those Ubisoft games.
Yeah.
So I have not become bored with any of the mechanics, which so I come in kind of cold to that, which I think is actually an advantage for me. And like I said, I don't know if it's a great game, but I am sort of enjoying playing an hour or two here. You do a couple missions.
That's cool.
The writing's fine.
Yeah.
You do get to like hang out in some cool Star Wars places though, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's still juice here, and you do get in some spaceship fights later.
Yeah, but that's nice to know. I've been it's a bit different for me because I have all these games I have to review before the end of the year. But I've gone back to Medieval Total War 2.
Oh,
for I don't know. I think I know why, because I saw a YouTuber I like playing a game, going back to that game and playing as England and try conquering a part of Europe. And I was thinking, that was a fun game. That was a nice enough game, and then not too complex as Total War games can be, I think, today, and just enjoyable. So I've been going back to that. Otherwise, this year a bunch of House of Torment, which is what they call. Do they call it Bullet Heaven? It's a game where it's like Vampire Survivors.
Okay.
But into this 90s sort of aesthetic and Diablo aesthetic and so on. And you have this hero with powers, and you collect weapons and you kill a bunch of enemies. And it's all very retro inspired and sort of pixelized a bit. And yeah, it's fun. I think I spent 100 hours on this game.
Oh, okay.
It's really something levels last about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So you can just go in for 30 minutes, an hour, and then it's a bit mindless. Once you know what to do, it's a bit, I'm just going to collect points and try to be the best character I can be. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'll wish you happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Yes.
Once we get there, getting close.
We'll try to get there. And I'm sure we'll speak in maybe not early January 2025, but I'm guessing we all have a bunch of Christmas parties and just try to relax basically during the vacation. But I'm certain we'll talk soon enough in 2025. So once again, Robert, thank you.
Oh, always a pleasure, Hugo.
And thank you to everyone who is listening. We'll be back, as I said, next year. And in the meantime, if you want to catch up on past episode, we are on pieuvre.ca. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So happy holidays.